All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and today we're coming with a not even necessarily projection. This is just based off of what I'm hearing and seeing in training camp so far. What our standard 4-3 base defense looks like as of today, July 28th. Now, of course, we have a training camp practice coming up. I'm recording this before the practice even starts. It's 8:20 right now. I don't know by the time y'all get this video, practice happens, maybe something changes, but so far, this is what the starting defenses look like through the first 3 days of practice. This is not necessarily projecting what the starting defense will be once we get down to the final 53-man rosters and we're going into the week 1 of the regular season. And then also another disclaimer I want to give y'all is that there is technically no starting defense. Joe Wood Jr. has emphasized this several times already. We're going to be heavily rotational based, like heavily, like depending on the offensive matchup. If the team prefers to use their tight ends, maybe a certain set of players will play more, especially secondary wise. And then if a team prefers to use quick, fast slot receivers type of thing, or prefers to utilize their running backs in the passing game, or utilize their running backs in between the tackles, depending on what the offensive matchup is, will definitely determine who's out on that field, just to let you know. But again, this is what the starting defense looks like as of today. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you still farm that like button, still farm the subscription button, and still farm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, I have you updated on every single day of every single practice or training camp that we have any little bit of access to. Y'all have already seen my breakdowns. If you haven't already, make sure you go check those out because I go position group by position group. We even do breakdowns of what the players and coaches said before and after practice, along with what exactly happened in practice, both good and bad. I'm gonna call out everybody for the good and the bad that they do. We go position group by position group, starting with quarterback to running back to tight end, all the way down through the offense, through the defense, and even to special teams as well. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that information. I will be coming out with a video later on breaking down what happens in practice today as well. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the video, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so starting with the interior defensive line, more specifically the defensive tackles. And of course, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne are your starters. And I feel like this is the perfect way to start. It makes the most sense to start here because I was going to start with the defensive line already. But on top of that, it just makes more sense to start here as well because these are like the two automatics. Linebacker is pretty obvious as well, but defensive line, especially interior defensive line, this was pretty obvious. These were automatic locks. We know who our starting two are. But the reason I have like a ghost version of Johnny Newton in the background with the low opacity on it is because I'm trying to emphasize to y'all how much he'll be heavily rotated into that the interior defensive line. Whether we're playing all three of them at the same time or Jonathan Allen or Daron Payne getting a lot more opportunities to just sit on the sideline and catch a breather. Remember last year, they had a down year compared to the 2022 season. I feel like the vast majority of that blame needs to go in the fact that they had to play so much. They were less efficient. They were less explosive. Their stamina was low. So they were out there more, but they weren't themselves even as much as they were in less snaps last year. Again, just way less efficient. They were not 100% snap to snap. They were out there just tired and basically just being a placeholder, just a body on the field, just a shell of themselves. Johnny Newton coming in and already just fresh off of 2 foot surgeries, already looking explosive as he does. I can't wait to see him in the preseason because I'm telling you right now, if I had to bet money on a guy outside of Jaden Daniels that will have an immediate impact as of week 1, where it's like, what would he have done? What would this team have done if we didn't draft this guy? That type of feeling, like, man, thank goodness we got this guy. I think Johnny Newton is probably my #1 candidate. And it's not just because Jaden Daniels was drafted first, Johnny Newton was drafted second. I feel like it's a mix of mostly who Johnny Newton is, but also the defensive line position. I mean, of course, now Dan Quinn does run more stunts than anybody else in the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys literally ran more stunts and things like that than any other defense in the NFL last year. So they're going to run a lot of stunts. There's a lot of nuance and veteran stuff that's going to take some chemistry build in there that Johnny Newton's going to have to work on. He may not necessarily be great at that immediately. But as far as just being a defensive lineman in general, That's probably the easiest transition from the NFL. I mean, from college to the NFL mentally, as far as like X's and O's wise. It's not as much strategy. Simply just beat the guy in front of you. Then Johnny Newton's already coming in with great pass rush moves. So this is what I'm talking about when I say, you know, some of it is because he's an interior defensive lineman. There's not much overthinking you can do there. It's not like a quarterback that has to memorize an entire playbook, or a linebacker that has to be the quarterback of a defense, or corners going from college to the NFL. That's probably the hardest jump and the most difficult position to be great at year one at the NFL level. It's just almost impossible to be a star corner year one. I mean, that's why Sauce Gardner is just so amazing, because that's crazy. But defensive lineman already, that's one thing. But then on the other side, it's also just who Johnny Newton is. Johnny Newton's just a different type of guy. I mean, he's just he comes in with a high floor. He comes in with a very high ceiling as well, so I'm really excited about his future. But as far as week one of the regular season goes, I can expect him, as long as he's fully healthy throughout this entire training camp, preseason, and everything, I'm expecting him to have a huge impact. I wouldn't be surprised if he even gets a sack in week one. And he's going to be a part of a heavy rotation with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, because those guys need breathers, man. They performed so much worse in 2023 than 2022. And I feel like, again, the vast majority of the reason is because they were just simply tired every play. And so Johnny Newton is not only going to come in and impact the game himself, but by allowing Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne to sit on the sideline, and we're not just completely incompetent up the middle because Jonathan Allen or Daron Payne are not on the field at that moment, that's going to allow them to take a break and come back out completely refreshed and dominant like they were in 2022, where they were having double-digit sack seasons. So I'm expecting big things. So again, that's why you have the ghost Johnny Newton back there. He's going to be a part of a heavy rotation. Not every position group is going to have like this little ghost person in the back. I'm only saying that to emphasize, showing y'all that to emphasize that this guy he may not necessarily be out there week one, snap one, but he's going to be out there almost as often as the starters in front of him. Now, next up, you have edge rushers. And so far, through training camp, Dorance Armstrong and Clelin Ferrell are your starting edge rushers. Dorance Armstrong, you know, if you're projecting based on the fact that he was a backup for Dallas, and you're projecting him to get starting level snaps and reps in games, he's technically a double-digit sack guy, but that's pure projection. Who knows? Maybe with more snaps, he's not as efficient, so maybe he's not really a double-digit sack guy. We got to see, but this is a guy that provides you some pass rush upside and some run stop and edge setting as well. Clelin Ferrell is the other edge rusher right now, I'm assuming because they prefer a guy that can stop the run, because Dante Fowler is the way better pass rusher. Clelin Ferrell is the way better edge setter, run stopper. So it just depends on what you prefer. Seems like in base defense, they're more so focused on stopping the run, I'm assuming. So they prefer to have Clelin Ferrell out there playing more snaps. Maybe Dante Fowler comes in. Well, he will come in as a situational pass rusher on obvious passing downs, like 3rd and long, maybe even like 2nd and long. That's when you'll start to see Dante Fowler out there a little bit more. So again, that's why he's like another ghost guy in the background, just like Johnny Newton was, because it just depends on the situation. Clelin Ferrell is in there when the offense is clearly running the ball. Dante Fowler is definitely going to be out there over Clelin Ferrell when the offense is clearly going to pass the ball. But then if it's kind of ambiguous and we're not exactly sure, say 1st and 10, Clelin Ferrell will probably, when in doubt, get those 50-50 snaps there. So that's why he is the starter right now based on what we're seeing in training camp. It would be lovely if Clelin Ferrell can gain some pass rush. I think it's more likely that Clelin Ferrell could become a better pass rusher than Dante Fowler, especially at his size, could become a dominant run stopper. But who knows? Hopefully one of those guys steps up. Maybe KJ Henry develops quickly enough to where he's one of these starters by the time we get to week one. That's a best case scenario, but we'll see, because again, Clelin Ferrell, basically just a run stopper, doesn't provide you much pass rush, and Dante Fowler, pretty much just a pass rusher, can't really set the edge for you. So either way, when one of those guys is on the field, you're weak in some way on defense. We'll see how we can work around it, and hopefully KJ Henry again steps up and can be great at both. I haven't necessarily seen the signs of it yet, but that's just the best case scenario. That's what we're rooting for as a fan base before we get to this regular season, for KJ Henry to step up and be that starter opposite of Dorance Armstrong. Now, linebacker-wise, it's obvious. Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner are your starting linebackers. And in our base defense, it looks like we're more than likely going to run a lot of nickel, because how do you keep Mike Sanford still off the field? We'll get there soon. So it sounds like, naturally, you will have 2 linebackers on the field, not 3 most of the time. But, of course, we have Jordan McGee as the ghost guy in the background, again, because he's going to be a part of a heavy rotation as well. I believe in this draft pick here. Frankie Louisville has already been talking very highly of him. Jordan McGee has even been talking very highly of himself. He's a very confident guy. We talked about that in one of my breakdowns. I believe it was day 2 or day 3 of training camp, where like he's talked very highly of himself. And then Frankie Louisville, most importantly, said that this guy's learning quicker than most rookies do. Like, this guy's coming in, he should be able to contribute right away for this team and have an immediate impact, and I'm expecting him to do so. Bobby Wagner's only getting older. He's going to be the quarterback of the defense and a great run stopper. Frankie Louisville is great at getting after the quarterback from the middle, from the outside. He's a great run stopper as well. He's decent in coverage, though. Jordan McGee should excel in coverage. So whenever it's obvious passing downs, you want Jordan McGee on the field as much as possible. Even though he is instinctual, he can contribute against the run. He's shown some stack and shed ability as far as getting off an offensive lineman and making stops against the run, you know, hopefully at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage rather than 5 yards down the field like David Mayo and Cody Barton love to do. We're seeing flashes of that, especially in his college tape, but coverage-wise, Jordan McGee is probably going to play a lot more than a lot of y'all think. Again, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louisville, great, but Jordan McGee probably steps up. Maybe it may not be as soon as week 1, but I believe at some point in this season, we'll all see that Jordan McGee probably is our best coverage linebacker, but he's not a coverage only linebacker. This guy can't stop the run as well, and hopefully at some point he will be passed the torch. And I mean, Bobby Wagner can't play forever, so at some point it's probably going to be Jordan McGee and Frankie Louisville as your 2 top dogs at linebacker. So hopefully Jordan McGee soaks up as much knowledge and experience from Bobby Wagner as possible. Now moving on to the outside corners, this one is very interesting. A lot of people may feel like this is pretty controversial. Emmanuel Forbes is one of your starting outside corners. Benjamin St-Juste, that was kind of like assumed. You could think that. I feel like the only debate that we could have was Michael Davis, who in 2022 was better than any of these corners that we have on roster. He was literally a top 15 corner in 2022. Then 2023, Chargers changed defensive coordinators, and they completely neglected the guy. Didn't even try to put him in great situations to win and things like that. So I don't really blame him for that. I blame the Chargers coaches. And if anything, I really thank the Chargers coaches, because if he had another season like 2022, but in 2023, 2 consecutively great cornerback seasons, we wouldn't have him right now, especially not at the price that we have him, very cheap. So he's basically on a 1-year prove-it deal because the Chargers set him up for failure, but I don't think that's necessarily on him. I mean, you can even tell by the fact that he's the only corner that has an interception so far in training camp, especially on Jaden Daniels. He's the only one that's picked off Jaden Daniels so far through 3 practices of training camp. He is a really good corner when used correctly, and I can trust Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. and Jason Simmons as your defensive passing game coordinator to utilize cornerbacks in the right way. I think they're going to get the most out of Emmanuel Forbes. That's why I feel like he's starting as well. This is not just a Michael Davis hype up hour, but I'm just telling you that we have some depth at outside corner that maybe people aren't necessarily expecting. Still a concern of mine, especially we got to see how good Emmanuel Forbes actually is. But from what we're hearing in practice so far, Emmanuel Forbes has not only been competing against Terry McLaurin and willing to cover him, but they've also been going toe to toe, like iron sharpening iron type of situation, where I believe it was the day 2 of practice. Emmanuel Forbes won like 1 rep, had a pass breakup, great coverage on Terry McLaurin. Then Terry McLaurin beat Emmanuel Forbes maybe the next play or a couple of plays later, deep down the field, caught a pass. And then 2 plays after that, Emmanuel Forbes shut Terry McLaurin back down as well. They're literally getting the best of each other. And if Emmanuel Forbes can do that to Terry McLaurin, then he's good to go. I'm not saying that he's ready to cover A.J. Brown one-on-one all game just yet, but he looks like he's way better, way more confident, way bigger. We already talked about this in my training camp breakdown from day 3 of practice earlier yesterday morning, that this guy seems like he should be ready to actually start now. But most importantly, like I've been saying the entire offseason, ever since we hired Dan Quinn as our head coach and Joe Wood Jr. as your defensive coordinator, Emmanuel Forbes is going to shine in this defensive scheme. Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio did him no favors in his development and actually teaching him how to be a DB, and most importantly, the scheme that they utilize. Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr.'s scheme is perfect for Emmanuel Forbes, because while Benjamin St-Juste is being like the Stephon Gilmore, the guy that covers long, Michael Davis, same thing, Emmanuel Forbes can step into the Trevon Diggs, Deron Bland role where he's interception hunting. He may not necessarily be able to cover guys for an extensive amount of time, First of all, how many corners can at the NFL anyway? But he's going to be that guy that takes risk, and you're either going to get a pick six from him, or he's going to allow a big play, first down, touchdown, or whatever. But you just live with that. The Dallas Cowboys have lived with that with Trevon Diggs back in 2022 and DaRon Bland in 2023, and it worked out perfectly fine for them. I'm expecting them to utilize Emmanuel Forbes in that same role. And if anything, even though DaRon Bland was elite last year at doing that, he was still a 5th round pick, and the Dallas Cowboys liked Emmanuel Forbes coming out of that draft more than they liked DaRon Bland. DaRon Bland was the backup plan. That's why they took him in the 5th round. But there were reports that Dan Quinn and those guys were willing to take Emmanuel Forbes in the 1st round. So if you saw DaRon Bland play as well as he did last year, and the Dallas Cowboys coming out of the draft wise liked Emmanuel Forbes more than DaRon Bland, imagine what Emmanuel Forbes can do in this defensive scheme, and especially with better players around him. I give the Dallas Cowboys the edge on edge rusher, not to, make a pun there, as far as because they have Micah Parsons, we don't. But outside of that, I prefer our safeties, I prefer our linebackers, I prefer our interior defensive line. So I feel like even just situationally, not even just schematically, but even the players around him, I feel like Emmanuel Forbes is in a way better situation going into this year than he was last year. So I'm very excited about that. And again, Benjamin St-Juste is solid. I mean, my whole thing is if all of the outside corners that we have on this roster can revert themselves back to the 2022 version of themselves, like if we could just do a hard reset and then reboot from the 2022 save file of these guys, we have a really good outside cornerback group. And that's arguably the only weakness we have on our defense right now, the uncertainty of how good our outside corners are. But if these guys can go back to the 2022 version of themselves, we're good to go, no worries at all. Benjamin St-Juste, remember 2022, he had that game against Justin Jefferson that he covered him as well as you can cover Justin Jefferson. And he had some pretty high moments throughout that season anyway. 2023, it seemed like he took a step back. Let's get him back to 2022, hopefully through scheme that can help a lot. Emmanuel Forbes, if you're thinking about 2022 as well, that was when he was at Mississippi State setting an NFL record, a college football record for pick sixes. And of course, like I already explained, Michael Davis for the Chargers in 2022 was literally a top 15 corner in the NFL, easily. So if we can get 2022 out of these guys, we're going to be something serious on this defensive side of the ball, because I'm not worried about the linebackers. I'm not worried about the interior defensive linemen at all. I love our safety group. So much talent. I don't even know who you're exactly going to play snap to snap, because there's so much talent who's not on the field at any given moment. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the safety part of this video. And then, edge rusher, maybe you have concerns, but I like the talent in our edge rusher room. And when in doubt, Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. are some of the top minds in the NFL as far as manufacturing pressure outside of just guys winning their one-on-one matchups. If your edge rushers aren't great enough to consistently win one-on-one matchups with offensive tackles, Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. are your guys to somehow find a way to create pressure in other ways. Blitzing the linebackers, you bring in Frankie Louvu to do just that, the DBs, whatever. So it's really just the outside corners that has me concerned as far as why. Like, if our defense isn't a top 5, at the very least top 10 defense this year, I feel like the outside corners will be the easiest thing to blame, the reason that they don't reach that level. But I'm starting to gain a little bit more confidence that these guys will play well, because we're seeing Michael Davis step up, looking more like his 2022 self, and Emmanuel Forbes is going toe-to-toe with Terry McLaurin. Now moving on to the next position, star/slot. Even though he's technically just a slot corner, I wouldn't necessarily consider Mike Sanford still a star, especially with how small he is. But this guy's gonna play 70% of snaps. He's gonna play immediately and start week 1. Now, he is a slot corner, so it just you have to think to yourself, like, how often will he be on the field? Because we have so many great safeties, we have so many other corners that can be on the field, and he being on the field, Mike Sanford still on the field, means one less linebacker. And we just talked about how Jordan McGee is going to be great in coverage as well. So I think even in spite of all of that, Mike Sanford still is going to see the field a lot, playing like 70% of snaps a game, only coming off the field when he's tired, because he's just that talented. He's that instinctual. He's only been playing defensive back for 2 years now. He used to be a wide receiver for Michigan. That's why you see him in practice so far in training camp returning punts, because that's what he's more natural at anyway. He's a receiver at heart, but he's just, I don't know, somehow within the 2 years of playing defensive back, he became one of the most instinctual players in college football, which is just insane when you're trying to project them into the future. future. I talk about this all the time, but Nick Saban said he's the best pound-for-pound player in the entire draft. Chris Sims said, do not be surprised if this guy is literally the #1 best slot corner in the NFL within a year or two. And I mean, Joe Klatt said he was the best defensive player on the best defense in all of college football. All of these type of compliments and all of this hype surrounded around Mike Sainristil, and we're seeing and hearing so far in training camp that he's living up to all of that and more. This guy's going to play immediately week 1. If it's not Johnny Newton, this Mike Sainristil is my vote for the rookies that are going to have an impact as soon as possible, like week 1, making plays. Don't be surprised if Johnny Newton gets a sack. Don't be surprised if Mike Sainristil gets a couple of pass breakups and some really good tackles for losses in the run game. I'm thinking that highly of him. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and get an interception week 1, but his presence will be felt, and this is a guy that we needed. I mean, we cut Danny Johnson towards the end of last season, basically letting the team know, yeah, we've given up. We're finally tanking. Danny Johnson's out of here. He was our only real slot corner. Once we cut him, we knew it was over with. We literally didn't have a slot corner on roster. Now we got one, and not only did we get one, but we got a great one, and potentially in Mike Sainristil. Dan Quinn spoke highly of him so far. He said that Jaden Daniels and Mike Sainristil are mature beyond their years, so you can expect both of these guys to outperform their rookie expectations. I've truly believed that. Now moving on to safety. Let's talk about it. So far, and we saw this in voluntary OTAs, we saw this in mandatory minicamps. I was curious when we got to training camp, was this going to hold strong? Was this going to hold true? It seems like Jeremy Chin is your strong safety. I thought of him as more of like a star position where like him and Mike Sainristil rotate in and out, but you try to get them both on the field as often as possible. And then I guess Quan Martin is your free safety. I saw him as more of a strong safety, taking over what Cameron Curl did last year. Not 2022 Cameron Curl, but 2023. Cameron Curl was more of like the star around the line of scrimmage guy, but then in 2023 he was more like the deep safety, but more of like the strong safety than the free safety. I thought Quan Martin would step into that. Jeremy Chin would be, I thought everybody would just be further down, closer to the line of scrimmage. I thought Quan Martin would be the strong safety rather than the free safety. I thought Jeremy Chin would be the star and like a hybrid linebacker type of guy rather than the strong safety. And I mean, I thought somebody else maybe would step up as like the, I don't know. It's really crazy how this has worked out, but I understand. It makes sense. You want your best defensive backs on the field as often as possible. Quan Martin looks like a star in the making. We haven't talked about him much so far in the training camp breakdowns because nobody's really talking about him, because we all just kind of have these expectations for him coming into this season, and he's apparently living up to those expectations and more. I'm hoping that we officially get like a quote from Dan Quinn at some point, but Quan Martin sounds like he's that guy. He's one of the alpha males. He's one of the best players in the secondary already. He didn't even get a full season worth of starting snaps last year. He just took that second half of the season, ran with it, developed, and now he's the guy at free safety. So you don't have anything to really worry about there. Then Jeremy Chin, I mean, absolute freak athlete, alien, one of the most athletic players in the entire NFL, regardless of position, arguably the most athletic safety in the entire NFL, outside of Tyler Owens, who we brought in as an undrafted free agent. I mean, he was an alien's alien. I mean, he's different, but right now he's so, you know, raw in certain areas that he's great at special teams, which I love to hear. Sounds like he'll potentially make the team at least for that, but he's so raw in certain areas that he's really unplayable on defense right now. But that's another freak athlete that's in his own tier by himself. But Jeremy Chin, I mean, absolute alien. You saw the flashes and the potential when he's defensive rookie of the year runner-up, only to Chase Young. And then similar to Mike Davis, but kind of even worse. Like Mike Davis, the Chargers were just bad at defensive coordinating and figuring out how to utilize them. The Carolina Panthers a defensive coordinator after Jeremy Chin's rookie season literally came in and was like, I don't care about the star Buffalo nickel. I literally don't care about having this a fifth defensive back on the field. That's not my problem. Jeremy Chin, you figure it out. Like, it was like neglect on purpose. I feel like it was more so in the Mike Davis situation for the Chargers at corner. It was more so they were just bad at their job. I feel like the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator didn't even try at his job at figuring out how to utilize Jeremy Chin, and he suffered for it. I mean, you still saw flashes even these past couple of years, but they didn't even try to put him in positions to win. And who can put a guy with the body type of a Jeremy Chin, a big hybrid safety linebacker type of guy, win better than Dan Quinn? From his time with Cam Chancellor to J. Ron Curse, back with the Dallas Cowboys most recently. And Jeremy Chinn is a far better athlete than both of those guys. I'm not saying Jeremy Chinn is going to be better than Cam Chancellor, because Cam Chancellor is a future Hall of Famer, so I'm not guaranteeing that at all, but he definitely has a higher ceiling because he's more athletic. He's faster, quicker, more explosive, all of that. So imagine what Dan Quinn can do with this mold of clay of just elite athleticism and elite versatility. So I'm really excited about both of those guys, but apparently he's your strong safety, but he can play around the box, he can cover and everything. He's your important chess piece. Like when you're struggling to cover a team's tight end because some of our corners are either too small or our linebackers are too slow, Jeremy Chinn is the answer. When a team has like a Jahmyr Gibbs or an Alvin Kamara that they utilize heavily in their offense, especially in the passing game, Jeremy Chinn is your answer for that, to take that player out the game as well. Jeremy Chinn, I mean, his unique skill set and elite athleticism is just something that really every defense covets. Every defense should want to utilize this. It's amazing that the Carolina Panthers had this and didn't want to, because this is a guy that has future all-pro written all over him if used correctly. You can't teach the athleticism that he has. He has 1%er level athleticism. I can't wait to see what the creativity and the creative minds of Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. can do with this guy. And then Jason Simmons coming in to help develop these guys on a mental and technical level as well. And with his track record, what he's done with the Raiders defensive backs over the past few years, I'm expecting greatness out of these guys. But now back to my main point is that you don't see Percy Butler on the screen, who was shown flashes. You don't see Derek Forrest, who was our starter, but he got hurt last year, so he barely played last year. But he was our starting free safety in 2022 and actually looked pretty good. I mean, he was fairly inconsistent, but he showed some very high flashes getting interceptions, and we're not used to our defensive backs getting interceptions outside of Kendall Fuller, so that was like a breath of fresh air. I mean, how do you not have him on the field? He's already a great athlete in himself with how big he is and how quick he is for his size. I mean, there's so much depth and talent in this safety group. It's really crazy thinking about who's not going to be on the field at any given point in time. Whoever's on the field, I'm happy. I trust Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. will get the most out of these guys. It's really amazing that if Jeremy Chinn, Quan Martin, and your boy Mike Sanford still on the field at the same time, that means no additional linebacker, only 2 linebackers out there. That also means no Derek Forrest nor Percy Butler, which is just insane right now. But that's just me being very high on our safety group. I think all of those guys have such immense potential that another team would love the opportunity to snatch them up away from us, but we'll see how that goes later down the line. So let's go ahead and just do an overall look of what all of these pieces look like on the field together, just to kind of give y'all that look. So of course you have Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne in the middle, Dorrance Armstrong and Cleveland Farrell as the edge rushers. Then you have Emmanuel Forbes outside on an island, Benjamin St-Juste with Mike Sanford still in the slot close behind him. Then Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu as your starting linebackers. Jeremy Chinn as your strong safety. He'll be a little bit closer to the actual like box and the line of scrimmage than like a Quan Martin is, and Quan Martin is your free safety. And I mean, you got to remember, first of all, too, I feel like I should have brought this up when we were talking about Quan Martin, but I believe he set an NFL record at the combine for vertical or something like that for safety. So like when we're talking about explosion, when you see it and you need to go get it and you need to explode onto the ball to make a play, pass, breakup, interception, whatever. I mean, apparently nobody else in NFL history, at least since they've been recording these things and we've been having a combine, could potentially do that better than Quan Martin. If he didn't set a record for it, I believe it was at the very least the highest in his draft class. My main point is this is a very explosive guy that we have at free safety. Free safety is not always about speed, man. Justin Simmons was never fast. I think he runs in the 4.5, 4.6s. You just got to be instinctual and explosive. He had that. A lot of the great safeties weren't like the fastest track guys. Quan Martin may not be the fastest 40-time guy, but he has that explosion. He's growing in instincts. I think he's going to be a great free safety for us. You know, we've been looking for a top-tier free safety for a very, very long time. I think Quan Martin may finally be that answer. And again, not only the defensive coaches, but the players around them. I mean, if you're just looking at this image right now, I mean, you could just expect everybody to do their job, man. I mean, especially, again, what I'm hearing from Emmanuel Forbes so far in training camp, if everybody's doing their job and nobody has to make up for everybody else's deficiencies or whatever, like Quan Martin isn't having to step up and make up for the fact that Frankie Louvu's bad at a certain thing or Mike Sanford still's bad at a certain thing. All he has to do is focus on doing what he does well. And then you have Bobby Wagner being the quarterback of the defense, so nobody has to overthink anything. I'm telling you, man, this defense has top 10, top 5 potential written all over it. I'm very excited. Y'all should be too. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Again, I want to keep emphasizing, re-emphasize the fact that this is just as of July 28th, and this is also going to be a very rotationally heavy defense. So this could be the starting defense week 1, snap 1, but maybe by snap 3, there's two or three completely different people on the field, and that are going to play probably almost as many snaps as the guys you see on your screen right now. Joe Witt Jr. went on his entire rant saying, do not ask me about a starting 11 players on defense ever again, because there will be no such thing. So I want to keep emphasizing that to y'all. Don't just look at this and assume these are the guys that are going to play all of the time. There's going to be a heavy rotation, but when in doubt, 1st and 10, this is the defensive setup that it looks like it's going to be so far, which again, I want to emphasize the fact that it's only July 28th. We're not even in September yet, so things could change. You never know. KJ Henry can end up stepping up and replacing Clelin Ferrell. Maybe Michael Davis shows that he should actually start over Benjamin St. Juste. Jordan McGee maybe steps up and plays more often, do you think? Maybe Derek Forrest or Percy Bartlett surprise us and somehow end up having being so great, developing so fast that they need to play over Jeremy Chin or Quan Martin. You just never know. So, and of course, Johnny Newton's going to get on that field a lot. You don't see Johnny Newton's face on the screen, but best believe he's going to be on that field almost as much, if not just as much, as Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne. There's going to be a lot of the times where he's on the field at the same time as Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne. I'm not going to lie. I would take Johnny Newton over Clelin Ferrell any day as my edge rusher. He's kind of small. He's kind of like an Aaron Donald type, where he's a little too small to really play defensive tackle, but he's so explosive. His floor is so high because he has great technique and counters and things like that already coming into the NFL, that this is a guy that you can play at interior defensive line. But if you need to play him an edge rusher, you can do that as well. He's kind of like an in-betweener. He's a small defensive tackle, but he's a big edge rusher. But hey, man, I'll take his explosion over Clelin Ferrell on the edge any day, please. So, hey, man, don't be surprised if really, I mean, you see Clelin Ferrell's face on there because he is technically one of the starting 2 edge rushers, but Johnny Newton's going to play more than Clelin Ferrell plays. I'm quite sure of that. So I just really want to emphasize that. But yeah, man, let me know in the comment section how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my points. Make sure you do not leave this video without leaving a like, and be on the lookout for a video later today breaking down day 4 of training camp, where the fans are allowed to go. So we're about to have a lot of clips from this one. Stay tuned. Really appreciate y'all. I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.